Flood Protection Project Update Virtual Public Meeting. This is one of 3 meetings. The first meeting was held on June 10th, the second on June 11th, and the third is this evening, June 17th. My name is Christine Butterfield. I'm your facilitator tonight. I'm with Management Partners. My role will be to keep us on track, on time, ensure we observe the ground rules, and provide an opportunity for as many of you to ask questions as possible. Next, I'd like to introduce our translators this evening. Would the Spanish translator please introduce themselves?
Yes, I am Ana Vidales and this is Jordi Vidales. We'll both be interpreting into Spanish.
Great, thank you. Would our Vietnamese translator please introduce yourself?
This is Quy Dao. Yes, I'm a Vietnamese interpreter.
Great, thank you very much. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Albert Lee. He is with the communications team at Valley Water, and he's going to provide you instructions on how to participate in tonight's meeting. Albert?
Thank you, Christine. So some of you may be familiar with Zoom, but we do want to cover this shortly. We are offering language for Spanish and Vietnamese for those who speak those languages. To access that language later on, you will see a circle icon, a globe icon, once we start that language interpretation. For Spanish, you will select Spanish as the option. For Vietnamese, you will have to select Portuguese. Unfortunately, Zoom does not currently list Vietnamese as an option on the language menu. We have submitted a request to Zoom to have that option enabled, and we hope they will add more languages in the future. If you're listening to these channels and hear the original sound but find it very distracting, you can mute the original audio. I will now have Ana and Jordi translate this in Spanish, and then we'll move to the Vietnamese. Ana and Jordi.
Buenas tardes. Se va a proporcionar servicios de interpretación. Para poder accesar los servicios de interpretación, usted en la parte baja de su pantalla va a ver un icono en forma de mundo. Usted tiene que darle un clic a ese icono y le va a ir ahí la opción de poder escuchar esta reunión en español. Además de eso, usted va a poder escuchar la reunión original en un 20% y la interpretación en un 80%. Si a usted le distrae estar oyendo ambos, usted puede venir y hay una opción que dice Mute Original Audio. Aprieta ahí y solamente va a escuchar la interpretación. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so we will now have the Vietnamese translators repeat the instructions in Vietnamese. Go ahead.
Kính thưa quý vị, nếu quý vị muốn được nghe thông dịch, xin quý vị bấm vào cái icon Interpretation để mà nghe tiếng Việt. Xin quý vị bấm cái chữ Portuguese. Vì lý do là Zoom hiện thời không có cái chữ Vietnamese trong đó, cho nên khi chọn ngôn ngữ, xin quý vị bấm chữ Portuguese. Sau khi mà quý vị đã đánh vô cái chữ đó rồi, thì quý vị sẽ có thể tiếp tục sau này, khi nào cần cũng vẫn có thể tiếp tục nghe trong ngôn ngữ đó được trong tương lai. Nếu mà quý vị muốn nghe những cái lời phát biểu chính thì xin ấn vào cái nút Mute Original Audio thì quý vị sẽ nghe cái diễn giải bằng tiếng Anh.
All right, thank you both. I will now be starting the interpretation function on Zoom. All right, so moving on to the functions of Zoom, most of you have joined us via audio. If you're having issues with stable audio, you may want to consider calling in. The dial number is on the screen, and the meeting ID is included on the website, but also some of the materials we sent out as well. Moving on to questions, you will have the opportunity to ask questions during this meeting. Christine, can you go on to the next slide? So one way and main way to do this is through the questions and answer portal. It's the Q&A portal. Once you click that, you can type in your question. For those who want to ask your question verbally, you can use the raise hand feature. This will have a raise hand next to your name. I will call you out by name and will enable your microphone. You will have to unmute yourself before you verbally ask your question. If you prefer to, you can ask your question in your language of comfort. I will ask one of the translators to come onto the main English channel to repeat that question in English. Although not recommended, some may feel comfortable to ask your questions through the chat box, but again, I don't recommend it. Your questions tend to get buried pretty quickly in the chat box as people chat in the box. All right, that's it for me. Christine, back to you.
Great. Now I'd like to introduce Jose Villarreal. He's actually the neighborhood liaison for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project and also a public information representative with Valley Water. Jose, would you like to say hello?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Looking forward to continuing to work with everyone in this community and as we move this project forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jose. Next, I'd like to introduce Director Barbara Keegan. Director Keegan was born in Canada to Irish immigrant parents. At the age of 12, her family moved to California and they subsequently became American citizens. She first moved to San Jose in 1975 and has lived in District 2 for most of her life and now represents this district on the Valley Water Board of Directors. She attended San Jose State University, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering. Director Keegan has a strong professional background in civil engineering, which includes many years of experience in successfully delivering capital projects and resolving construction disputes. She was the second woman engineer to be hired by the City of San Jose's Public Works Department, where she worked for more than 19 years and rose to the level of division manager. The last 2 years of her career, she spent at Valley Water. With that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Director Barbara Keegan to provide our welcome on behalf of the Board of Directors. Director Keegan?
Thank you so much, Christine, for the introduction, and thank you also to all of the participants that are here tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to participate in this. You know, usually our preference is to actually be out in the community, to have you have the opportunity to look at displays and ask questions of us in person. We have important project discussions and we want to be able to answer all your questions. But the current public health crisis is requiring us to do things a little bit differently. Our primary focus here is we want to keep everyone safe. And so for that reason, we've scheduled a Zoom event that allows us to participate with you while continuing to practice social distancing, which is so important in these days. Being able to connect with you even remotely, especially during these challenging times, really reinforces our commitment to providing you with meaningful project information and addressing the concerns that you have about this project that's going to affect you and your community. I would like to acknowledge that we have some elected representatives or their staffs joining us tonight. Christine, do you have any information on that?
Yes, I'd like to invite Rachel Gibson, the Deputy Administrative Officer with Valley Water and the Office of Government Relations, to provide those introductions.
Thank you, Christine and Director Keegan. It's my pleasure to announce that we also have joining us from our Board of Directors, Director Linda Lizotte and Director Tony Estranera. And we also have Carrie Duncan representing Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren.
Great, thank you so much. So we've heard from many people in the community over the last few months regarding the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project, because we all know that it is the success of that project and the delivery of that project works together integrally with Coyote Creek improvements. There's been a lot of news about Anderson, particularly regarding the directive from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. So FERC directed us to begin dewatering Anderson Reservoir by October 1st, 2020. Tonight, you're going to hear about the timeline for that and how it coordinates with the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. So we have great confidence in our staff and our partners at the local, state, and federal level that the project will be completed in a manner that delivers what our commitment is to support both public health and public safety in our communities. And we also want to provide improved flood protection in the community as well. So my board colleagues and I continue to vigorously advocate with our state and federal representatives to secure funding for these important water supply and flood protection projects. Their investment is critical to achieving flood protection projects for our communities, and it's, you know, just vital. We're also monitoring discussions at the federal level on the potential availability of stimulus funding for public works projects that are ready for construction. As you all know, I'm a civil engineer, and I've been through some of these economic cycles in the past, and it's very important to be project ready, ready to go if we want to be competitive in terms of getting stimulus funding. So I want you to know that our staff is totally engaged and on the ball and ready to act quickly so that we could get our fair share of funding for the vital public safety projects that we need in our community. So tonight, what do we want? We want your input and feedback on the Coyote Creek recommended project alternatives. So please feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts with us. We have a whole variety of staff here from various divisions of Valley Water, and they're going to be available to respond to you all during the question and answer portion of tonight's virtual meeting. Thank you again for your support, patience, and collaboration on these projects. Personally, I appreciate it very much, just as the rest of the board and all our staff. So at this point, Christine, I'd like to turn the meeting back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Keegan. There are several other individuals I just wanted to recognize. First, thank you to Yves Sutty from the City of San Jose Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department. He's with us tonight, as well as a former member of the Board of Directors, Patrick Ferraro. So thank you for joining us this evening. Before we jump into the staff presentations, I would like to run through some of the meeting logistics. So again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an opportunity for staff to present a brief update on the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project, to present the Coyote Creek flood protection project recommended alternatives, and then again introduce you to the Coyote Creek flood protection design team. And as we mentioned, the bulk of the meeting is really to hear from you and provide you an opportunity to ask questions about both of these projects. Our agenda tonight, thank you again, Director Keegan, for your welcome. We'll spend about 35 minutes hearing 2 staff presentations, and then into our second hour, we'll open it up to members of the public to ask questions, and we'll wrap up at about 8 p.m. tonight. So meeting logistics. This meeting's being recorded along with the meeting on June 10th and June 11th, and you're welcome to view those at a later time. Again, as questions arise, because we're leading with the staff presentations, please note those. We'll open the meeting to questions at about 7:05 from the public. Submit your questions to the Q&A portal. You're welcome to submit your questions verbally by raising your virtual hand, and we will call on you. In addition, this meeting is being telecast on Facebook, and you're also welcome to post questions there, and Valley Water staff will relay those into the Zoom Q&A portal. Please review the frequently asked questions and answers. Those questions were comprised based upon what Valley Water heard from the public, those themes, those patterns of questions. And certainly, as a result of these 3 meetings, it's likely that those materials will be updated. To find materials on the project, please go to Valley Water's website, www.valleywater.org/coyote-creek. And we want to thank you in advance for your patience with this virtual meeting, as well as joining us this evening. And the ground rules. We've talked about these at previous meetings that certainly I've participated with on this project. We encourage you to listen with an open mind, submit your questions to participate. Again, we'll open the floor and start fielding questions following the 2 staff presentations. Be curious, assume good intent, use productive and respectful language. Be brief and concise to ensure that all those interested can participate We encourage you to submit an initial question. You're welcome to submit follow-up questions, but we want to ensure that all those that are participating have an opportunity to engage with staff that are available and participating in this meeting. And lastly, please refer any questions related to ongoing litigation to your respective attorney. Now, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Chris Hakes, the Deputy Operating Officer of Dam Safety and the Capital Delivery Division. He's going to provide an update on the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project. Chris?
Thank you very much, Christine. I'm going to start sharing my screen to pull up my presentation, and then we'll get started. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Just a quick kind of brief overview of what I'm going to give a presentation about today. Although I'm here to talk about the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project update, the bulk of the discussion of this presentation will be about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission Order Compliance Project. So we'll be talking a lot about what FERC directed us to do on February 20th and how it ties into the Anderson Dam project as well as the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. It is a unique project with its own utility. They've given us the direction and there are a number of elements that are tied in with the project that you would have seen previously in the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project or the Coyote Flood Protection Project. However, the FOCP, the FERC Order Compliance Project, is its own independent project with its own independent utility. So the flood elements or the flood protection elements that are actually in the FOCP are required to allow for operation of the new low-level outlet that I will be showing you guys. And that is a direct result to mitigate the flows that will be produced or might possibly produce in a wet year. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation, and we'll talk about a little bit more about what our board of directors adopted as the project goals for Anderson Dam a while ago. I think it was towards October, November. So specifically, they had 4 project goals. Public safety was always the top priority. We also had a goal for environmental enhancement. Whatever project we do want to do, we wanted to do in a, oops, sorry about that, in a manner that was environmentally friendly. We also have, oops, sorry about that. My computer's going a little bit, there we go. So basically I said, public safety, water supply. We want to make sure that the project does help to maintain our water supply. Obviously, if we retrofit the dam, we will get our ability to fill it back to its capacity back. That will be a great help to a resilient water supply for the future. And then we wanted to do the project in a financially sustainable manner. Basically, we want to make sure that the resources are used prudently and that this is a large project and a large investment, and we do it in a fiscally sound manner. Next slide. So here you can see the existing components of Anderson Dam. You will have a spillway on the upper left quadrant of the picture, an outlet pipe, which we would consider to be undersized by today's standards, that runs right through the middle of the dam, the middle bottom. Basically, you can see that the dam embankment and dam crest, which is basically the top of the dam, the roadway that you drive over currently, basically goes right over the top of the outlet pipe. So that's the existing components, and as part of the Anderson Dam Seismic Retrofit Project, we'll be addressing about numerous components, but about 5 different areas. One, we'll be taking up all of the material that's in the embankment except for the core material. When we first started the project in 2013, it looked like we just had to add some material to the downstream face, the left side of the dam. Unfortunately, the geotechnical explorations that we did in 2016 and 2017 informed us that there was a greater potential for the middle of the dam to kind of fall down and depress, or slump as we call it, in the middle of an earthquake. Since that's the case, we're going to remove all of that unsuitable material and replace it with material that during an earthquake won't kind of slump like that. We do have a spillway. Originally, we were going to patch the spillway and just kind of make minor modifications and repairs to it. However, after 2017, and some of you may be remembering the torrential rains, of course, but there was the dam up north, Orville, which had a massive failure of the spillway. As a result, the California Department of Water Resources Division of Safety of Dams, DSOD, mandated that all of the criteria for spillways be updated. And as a result, most of the spillways across the state need to be fully replaced. So during this project, we'll also be replacing its spillway in its entirety. We have a new low-level outlet pipe that no longer runs under the center of the dam. This is to accommodate up to 4 feet of movement during a seismic event. We've got a large tunnel with a pipe in there that can move, allowing it to maintain its operations during and after an earthquake. And then we have a temporary water diversion system by which we'll actually drain the reservoir completely empty. What we'll talk about with the FERC order compliance project is a little bit different. We're draining down to what we call dead pool. The diversion system will actually let us go down to the bottom of the reservoir so we can do the embankment construction. And then we have a high-level outlet pipe. This is another mandate from the Department of Safety of Dams, DSOD, that allows us to drain up to 30% of the reservoir capacity within 7 days if directed after a seismic event. So that's a new requirement to meet existing standards as well. So let's talk about what happened on February 20th. We did receive a letter from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that said that the interim risk reduction measures that were currently in place, so our current seismic limit, was insufficient because of the public safety aspects and the risk to the downstream community that existed. Even though we had a back and forth about what the appropriate level of the reservoir was to balance water supply, environmental need, and public safety, FERC is pretty conservative, and they've said the best way to make sure that you don't have a event of uncontrolled release of water during a seismic event is to make sure that the reservoir is as low as possible for as long as possible. So that's basically the crux of the directive. There were 6 elements that have been identified here. We were to immediately lower the restricted elevation, the operating level of the reservoir, from 592 to 565. We were also to develop a plan to drain the reservoir down to dead pool and maintain that level in the case of rains, basically through the season. On October 1st is when we're actually supposed to start draining down to dead pool. They have given us some time to put that water to beneficial use, which is what we're doing. And then, of course, I said develop a plan to maintain dead pool in the event of significant rains. We have to expedite the tunnel construction. So I mentioned the new outlet tunnel that's going through our right abutment. As a way to better control the water surface level in the reservoir, we will be constructing this new tunnel, which varies in diameter, somewhere, depends on where you are, but between 19 feet in diameter, 24 feet, 24 and a half feet in diameter actually, and 8 feet in diameter. So we'll be constructing this tunnel to give us the ability to discharge more water out of Anderson and better control the reservoir level, about up to 5 times what we have now when factored in with the existing outlet. And then the last kind of directive was we were to secure the permits and complete the design for the overall seismic retrofit project. And that's because even though these elements give us the ability to better control the reservoir level, they do not remove all of the seismic deficiencies that are existed in the dam. It was built in 1950. To get it up to standard, we need to do several other things, and that's the overall seismic retrofit project. So our response, when we received that letter on February 20th, we were in immediate compliance with the new restricted level of 565. We were actually at about 552. That's because we were in our winter operations mode and had already been setting the level of the reservoir so as not to exceed the restriction. We immediately started planning the Anderson Dam Tunnel project to expedite design and construction of the outlet. So basically we spun off a portion of what used to be the Anderson Dam project. We took that tunnel outlet, modified it a bit, and incorporated it into the FOCP through the Anderson Dam Tunnel Project, or ADTP. I'm sorry for all the acronyms. We also created the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission Order Compliance Project, or the FOCP. And basically that contains not just the tunnel construction, but all of the different measures that we're going to use to address the order that was given to us by FERC. It basically has 11 unique elements across 4 different areas. For this meeting, I think the key area to talk about is the draining of the reservoir, the construction of the tunnel, and then what the flood protection mitigation elements that have been identified are. And those are the Coyote Creek elements that you'll be hearing about later. And then, of course, On May 26th, our board of directors did approve the preliminary project description, which is basically a listing of all the different elements that are contained in the FOCP. So what happens during the FOCP? Of course, we're already in compliance with the elevation 565, so it says we're in compliance. October 1st, we'll begin to drain the reservoir down to dead pool, or 488. Dead pool is not completely empty. It's the lowest level that we can drain the reservoir to using our existing inlet-outlet system. So there will be water in the reservoir. Unfortunately, it's not usable from a recharge or drinking water perspective or environmental release because we can't get it out of there. And dead pool that water does tend to be a little bit stagnant. It will be, I would say, shallow compared to the overall depth of the dam. So that would create a hotter condition where the dissolved oxygen in the water will probably drop, which will lead to an inhospitable environment for any fish that may be caught there. That is part of the reason why it's called dead pool. So on October 1st, we will begin draining. We have submitted a plan, not plans and specifications, but a plan to FERC on March 20th in order, it's kind of a schedule to get this done for the outlet tunnel construction. We'll begin construction in early 2021. We expect the tunnel construction itself will take between 18 and 24 months, and then we'll have the tie-in to the reservoir, and we expect the project to be complete by the end of 2023 and go into operation. Other measures that we've identified, as I've said, is downstream flood protection mitigation. Those are the Coyote Creek elements. We will be monitoring the outlet and the rim around the reservoir as we draw down at a very slow, cautious rate in order to make sure there's no landslides that would affect our ability to use that outlet system. And then we're also identifying other mitigation measures as necessary to minimize the impacts to both the environment and water supply. So as you can see, we have a large list of permits. FERC has deemed this an emergency action. So the federal entities that you see listed there are in emergency consultation or urgent consultation right now. So we're going through the consultation process in a very compressed manner. We are also working with the state agencies that you see, Department of Safety of Dams, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, State Water Resource Control Board, and the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officer, in order to get the consultations done prior to October 1st, which is when we'll start draining the reservoir. We also have some local municipal approvals that are required, cities, Morgan Hill, San Jose. So there are a large number of permits required, and we are en route to get those in time. Here's the project schedule. As on the top, you see the Anderson Dam Tunnel Project. On the bottom, you see the overall seismic retrofit project. I would focus kind of exclusively on the top right now. It does show us going out to construction in 2021. Basically, it says we're going to be done by 2024, but basically what it is we'll be done by the end of 2023. It says drain to elevation 488, which is dead pool. The bottom section where you see the overall seismic retrofit project is still in discussion with FERC. This dam construction timeline shows a fully dewatered reservoir. We believe if that is the case, that we can actually shrink the construction duration. However, FERC may allow us to put more water back into the reservoir after construction of the tunnel because of our better ability to control the level. That may provide us with a way to further minimize environmental and water supply impacts. What it would do, though, is lengthen the overall construction period because we wouldn't have a fully dry reservoir to work on the embankment on. So the reason I say not to pay too much attention to this lower section right now is because we're still in discussions with FERC. We expect by the time we come to the community next time, this schedule will have been agreed upon and we can give you some more firm information. And that's the end of my presentation, so I'll turn it back over to Christine.
Great. Thanks, Chris. That was very informative. Now I'd like to turn the next presentation over to Damaris Villalobos Galindo. She's the project manager on the flood protection project, and she's going to be joined by Alec Nicholas, the capital engineering manager. Damaris?
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now.
Great.
Can you see my screen? Christine, can you see my screen?
I can. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna start my presentation now. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us, dedicating 2 hours of your time to learn more about this project. Again, my name is Damaris Villalobos Galindo. I am the project manager for the planning phase of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. And tonight, I'm gonna talk about the preferred project alternative. Now, before I delve into the details of the project, let me just close this so that you can see the entire presentation. Before I delve into the details of the project, I wanted us to get our bearings into where we are in the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. This first column here shows the major phases of the project. Let me get my nice pointer. So these are the major phases of the project: planning, design and permitting, and construction. The next column shows the major components of each of the phases. If you were able to join past meetings in spring and in fall of 2019, you probably heard me talk about problem definition, conceptual alternatives, feasible alternatives, and now we are in the preferred project alternative component. Basically, we are at the end of the planning phase, moving into design and permitting within the summer of this year. And Alec is gonna talk a little bit more about this as we get near the end of this presentation. But this is where we are right now, at the end of the planning phase of the project. Now, what am I going to talk about today? So today, I'm going to give a very brief overview of what we've accomplished together in the past meetings. I'm going to talk about the feasible alternatives that we have considered and that we have together formed. I'm going to talk about how we go from feasible alternatives moving into the preferred project alternative via the natural flood protection process. Then I'm going to talk about the phasing of the project elements, which has to do with what Chris Hakes was mentioning in his presentation. And I'm gonna go over again the project timeline. In this area, I'm gonna actually talk, I'm gonna introduce the design team, and then the design team is gonna talk about the next steps. What can you expect to see in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and the next few years? Now, what have we accomplished in the past? So for those of you that were able to join our last sets of meetings, actually for people that couldn't, those meetings have been recorded and they are posted in our website in case you want to go back and review them or just watch them for the first time. So back in spring of 2019, I presented the conceptual alternatives of the project. We obtained public input and we used that input to create the feasible alternatives for the project. Now, in fall of 2019, I presented the feasible alternatives as well as the criteria for the feasible alternatives. I obtained public input, and then now we're moving into the preferred project. So at one point in time, we need to have the preferred project that we can have to move into design and construction. So that is where we are now, and we're getting actually comments right now. Now, before I delve into the details of the preferred project alternative, I just wanted to remind you, everyone, that the project scope is very long. It's 9 miles long. It goes from Montague Expressway all the way to Tully Road. And there are several major parks and roads and critical facilities located within the scope of the project. We have Watson Park, for example, William Street Park, Selma Olinder, Kelly Park, just to name a few. We also have major highways like Highway 880, Highway 101, Highway 280, and some other major streets and roads like Oakland Road, Berryessa Road, Santa Clara Street, William Street, and Tully Road. And we have several residential, industrial, and commercial areas located within the project scope. Now, because the project scope is so long, we've divided it into sections or areas, and we call them here reaches. So whenever you hear me say reach, reach 4, reach 5, I'm talking about a specific area. Reach 4 goes from Montague Expressway to Old Oakland Road. Reach 5 goes from Old Oakland Road to Maybury Road. Reach 6 goes from Maybury Road all the way to Santa Clara Street. Reach 7 goes from Santa Clara Street to Highway 280. And Reach 8 goes from Highway 280 to Tully Road. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because as I go over the feasible alternatives, as I mentioned to you, the list of project feasible alternatives, I'm talking about alternatives for the entire project scope. So we're looking for the preferred project that is gonna meet the requirements for the entire project scope and not only a specific section. Now for this meeting, I'm focusing on the project elements located within these two reaches, Reach 6 and Reach 7, basically from Maybury Road all the way to Highway 280. On June 10th, last week, I focused on Reaches 4 and 5, and on June 11th, I focused on Reach 8. So you're welcome again to go to our website and review those recordings. Now, how do we develop a project alternative? So in the past, as we had meetings in spring and fall of last year, which seems like a long time ago, what we did is we developed together what I like to call flood risk reduction options for each of the reaches or each of the areas. For example, for Reach 4, we developed 2 options. For Reach 5, we developed 1. For Reach 6, we developed 1. For Reach 7, we developed 5 flood risk reduction options. And for Reach 8, we developed 1. So what does it mean to have a project alternative? A project alternative is basically a combination of these various options. Alternative 1, for example, we have 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A, and 8A. Alternative 2, we have a different combination, now selecting 7B. Project alternative 3, now we're selecting 7C, 7D, 7E. And then you notice we haven't used 4B. So now we have to select 4B and make different combinations with the different flood risk reduction options for each reach. Now we have a total for this specific project, for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. We have a total of 10 project alternatives, and I'll go over what those are specifically for reaches 6 and 7. And then we always add the no project alternative to all of our projects, because sometimes, not specifically for this project, but sometimes having a no project, doing nothing is better than actually adding some structural elements to the various areas. So how does 6A look like? How does 7A, 7B, C, D, E, how do they look like for this community? Okay, so now going into 6A, before I go into the details, I wanna go over the legend. So pink means a berm, and I'll show you pictures of what this is. Yellow, it's a passive barrier, and orange is a flood wall. So for Reach 6, and we only have one option, 6A, what we're proposing is to have flood walls from Maybury Road all the way to Highway 101, reducing the risk of flooding to this critical facility here, the City San Jose Maybury Yard, as well as this industrial/commercial area on the west side of the creek. We're also proposing a flood wall that's gonna reduce the risk of flooding to Highway 101. Now moving on to Watson Park. You might remember this from past meetings, but what we're proposing is an approximately 1,200 feet long, 6 feet tall flood wall that is gonna replace the existing retaining wall that is in that location. And that's gonna continue and become a passive barrier and then a berm. So these 3 elements I'm working in conjunction to basically contain any flood waters within the park, so that they don't get out of the park, go into Jackson Street and flood areas of Monferrino Drive like they did in 2017. So all of these areas work in conjunction, these project elements. Now, we're also proposing flood walls to reduce the risk of flooding at the Empire Gardens Elementary School. Moving to the east, we're proposing a short flood wall to protect Kellogg Company. And we're also proposing a flood wall 5.5 feet tall approximately to reduce the risk of flooding to the Parkside Terrace apartments. Now just very quickly, a cross section of how they might look like. So basically for this area, we have a flood wall. In this area, we have in here either a raised levee or install a 3 feet tall flood wall. Now, since then, we've had several meetings with the City of San Jose, and they actually have a proposed project here where they are proposing to build a trail in this area. So we're working in close coordination with them so that we can have both our projects coming on here at the same time, or you know, both projects are coordinated in this area. Now, just pretty quickly, a cross section in this area, how might it look like from the ground? If you're looking at this passive barrier from Jackson Street, you're gonna look at the passive barrier once it's up. you have the berm, and then you have this flood wall on this side. So basically what these elements are doing are containing the water within Watson Park. As you might remember, Watson Park got flooded during 2017. Watson Park is part of the historical floodplain of Coyote Creek. So what we're doing is allowing the creek to do what it wants to do in this area without flooding the residential areas. And just another picture of how this area might look like. So we have the Parkside Terrace apartment buildings and an approximately 5.5 foot flood wall. Now, how would a flood wall look like? We don't know yet. That's gonna be determined during the design phase of the project with your help and with the help of stakeholders. So we understand, and the board understands, that it is important for any element that we're proposing to reflect the character of the community. And during the design phase, as aesthetics is gonna be an important element. We know what we need to have in here. We know the element, a flood wall, but in terms of how it looks like, it can look in various ways. If you ask me, if I have a flood wall in my neighborhood, I would like to have murals and art and things like that, but other neighborhoods might wanna have some other things. So these are just examples of how flood walls might look like. Now, how would a berm look like? We don't know yet. What we do know, a berm is a kind of a raised strip of land that provides that vertical barrier to contain water within a specific area. This first example, it's an existing berm that was constructed right after the February 2017 event. This one is approximately 3.5 feet tall. I included this picture with this person standing here, kind of at the bottom of the berm, and then we have some people standing at the top of the berm. Again, this is a 3.5 foot berm. And then what they did back in 2017, after the 2017 flood event, there's also a road that was built on top of the berm to allow access into the other side of the berm. So that is something that is possible to add, a road to access it, to inspect it, and to do any maintenance that needs to be done in this berm. Now, this is another example here. Actually, when we went to the San Jose Parks advocates to talk to them about the project, some of them were talking about, oh, we would like to see local plant pollinators, local pollinator plants that can attract critters and bees and hummingbirds. So that's another example of how it might look like, depending on the neighborhood. There's other different examples in here of a berm. All we need is a vertical clearance. And of course, we need to have enough room. It needs to be wide enough so that we can have enough room to build that berm. Now, I'm not gonna go into the details of a passive barrier, but I've included these in the presentation because this presentation is also included in our website. You're welcome to look at the videos of how the passive barrier look like, how does it work? Yeah, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time in the interest of time today. Okay, so all of the elements that I mentioned before, flood walls, berms, all of those apply to Reach 7 as well. So I'm not gonna present pictures after all of the options for Reach 7 because as you saw, there are 5 flood risk reduction options for Reach 7. So I'm gonna try to be brief and succinct, but there are a lot of elements and I do want everybody to understand how do they work together and what are those elements that we are proposing. So I'm gonna start with 7A. Again, we have 7A through 7E. I'm gonna start with the legend. Pink means berm, purple means elevate, orange means flood wall, and yellow means passive barrier. Now, in order for me to be a little bit more, not to spend too much time on these maps, because I don't wanna spend all of the time we wanna hear from you, I actually changed these call outs. The pink ones are the ones that are gonna change from option to option. And the white ones are the ones that are gonna stay the same. So I'm only gonna go over everything for the option 7A, and for the option 7B through E, I'm only gonna go over the pink elements, which are the ones that change. Now, for the purple areas, we are proposing to elevate those structures. We're proposing to elevate structures that are located on South 17th Street between Santa Clara Street and San Fernando Street. Those are 3 properties. Elevate all 4 properties located east of Arroyo Way. 3 properties located west of Brookwood Avenue, 2 properties located at the corner of San Salvador Street and South 17th Street, and 1 property located at William Street, right next to the William Street Bridge. Elevate basically means what it says, elevate or raise the structure above the base flood elevation. Now I'm gonna go over the flood walls. Flood walls are orange, so we're proposing to have flood walls in the backyards of these 2 properties located just north of Arroyo Way. In the backyard of this property located on Brookwood Avenue, at the western edge of Coyote Outdoor Classroom, to reduce the risk of flooding to all of these properties here located east of South 16th Street. Flood wall located west of Olinder Elementary School, that is going to reduce the risk of flooding to the school, as well as all of this area that flooded during 2017. And I'll mention a little bit more as I go over the passive barrier elements. And then a flood wall located in the backyards of 2 properties located just south of William Street Park. For a berm, for this specific option, we're proposing a berm at the western edge of William Street Park. Passive barriers, there are 2 areas, one at the entrance of the Coyote Outdoor Classroom, as well as at the east edge of Selma Olinder Park. Now these 2 elements, this one, passive barrier, as well as the flood wall, they work in conjunction so to collect or to contain the water within Selma Olinder Park. These 2 parks are part of the historical floodplain of Coyote Creek. And as you know, both got flooded during 2017. And water exited out of this area and flooded all of these streets, 19th Street, 20th, 21st, 22nd. So these elements are designed to contain water within Selma Olinder Park so that all of these areas do not flood. Now I'm gonna go over 7B a little bit more quickly. Sorry for the delay, but I wanted to go over that in detail. Now, the elements that have changed are the pink callouts. Basically the purple areas, instead of elevate, have become acquire. What does that mean? It means acquisition of the properties, and the purpose is to demolish and return the land to the riparian corridor. Basically, vegetate and return the land to the creek, to the riparian area. All of those areas in purple were elevate, and now we have changed to acquire. And then the berm has not changed in this option. This is 7B. 7C, we go back to elevate, but now our passive barrier, our berm has changed to passive barrier. 7B, we again have the passive barrier, but we're combining it now with acquire the properties in purple. And finally, 7E is a hybrid of either elevate or acquire, together with a berm, a 2 feet to 4 feet tall berm at the western edge of William Street Park. So how would elevate look like? So I've been told this picture, we like to use it as a poster child of the February 2017 event, but it's important for us to look at this picture to see the flood, the water surface elevation, the level of flooding that happened, specifically to homes that are located within the banks of the creek. This is the home during 2017. This is the date, this is January 26, 2020. So this picture is recent, well, 5 months ago, but it seems like 10 years ago, but it was 5 months ago. You can see that the home has been painted, and there are some elements that have been, you know, it's been beautified, but it's still located within the banks of the creek. So what does elevate mean? Back in January, we contracted the services of a consultant to do a planning level feasibility assessment to see if we could even bring to the table elevate. Because we can talk about elevate, but what if the home, you cannot elevate the home? So basically we asked them to come, and I wanted them to come and see all 10 properties that I wanted, that at that point we were proposing to elevate, but we were only able to see 4 properties, unfortunately. But the information that they gave us was very, very helpful. So this is a rendering of this same house. This is actually the front of the house, this area in here. You can see the window, you can see this area here. So this is the front, and basically it is elevated on columns and elevated up to the street level. another example of how elevation might look like. This is another home located on South 17th Street. This is the back of the home. And this is a rendering of how the home might look like. This is just a planning level rendering of how it might look like once it's elevated. You can see that it's elevated to street level. Now, how do we go from having all these 10, 11 feasible alternatives into actually selecting a preferred project? We do this using the Natural Flood Protection Framework. And this framework, it's a Valley Water Board policy that looks to balance environmental quality, community benefit, and protection from flooding in a cost-effective manner, considering the physical, hydrologic, and ecological functions and processes of a stream. So basically, this gives us effectively the least environmentally damaging practical alternative. This framework was not developed by the project team. It was developed a while back in the early 2000s. And again, it's a Valley Water Board policy that was developed by a group of external and internal experts. And also it basically grades a project from a point of view of 36 different environmental criteria. What does that mean for us? So again, I've listed all of the project alternatives in this slide from alternative 1 all the way to 11. And I also listed the estimated planning level costs. The project cost in the planning level has been approximated between $72 million and $92 million. I also added the expected annual operations and maintenance costs in this last column, between $1.2 and $1.3 million annually. And then no project, basically, you don't have any cost of the project, and then you also have a kind of approximated average cost up to now of doing maintenance in the creek. You apply the NFP framework, select the preferred project alternative. This NFP, or Natural Flood Protection Framework, is a qualitative method, and it's selected two high rated project alternatives, alternative 7 and alternative 10. And I'll show you how they look like for the two areas that we're focusing on. 6A, of course, doesn't change. 7, we have 7B and 7E. Just showing you a picture of 6A. We only have one option. 7B, the purple areas here, acquire. It's all acquire. And then we have the berm on the western edge of William Street Park. And 7E is the hybrid option, elevate or acquire in the purple areas. And we have also the NFP process has selected the 2 to 4 feet tall berm. So those are the preferred options. Now that concludes the preferred option presentation, the preferred project alternative presentation. But I wanted to go over the FERC order compliance flood management measures, since this has been, some residents and also stakeholders have been confused about what this means for us for this project. So again, on February 20th, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission sent a letter to Valley Water directing Valley Water to start lowering Anderson Dam to dead pool no later than October 1st, 2020. FERC also directed Valley Water to expedite implementation of the diversion tunnel system, the Anderson Dam Tunnel project. This tunnel system is scheduled to complete construction by December 2023. And this tunnel system is designed for a maximum discharge of 2,000 cubic feet per second, plus additional contribution from existing outlet and tributary flows. What does this mean for us, for this project? So basically, Valley Water has identified those areas within Coyote Creek where flooding would occur as a result of implementing the FERC order. Those elements happen to be part of our some of the elements in our Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. And these elements are necessary as avoidance and minimization measures for the ADTP to prevent flooding within urbanized areas. This project is called the FERC Order Compliance Project. Which areas are those? So basically, the FERC Order Compliance Project identifies some flow thresholds that the ADTP emergency operation is gonna see from upstream. And I've identified, I listed them in this table. We look at the approximate creek capacity within the area of the project, and we identify those areas that have capacities that are lower than the threshold or than the ADTP emergency operation values. Those areas are located within reaches 5, reaches 6, and reaches 7. What does this mean? So for reach 6, you've seen this map before. You can see that there are some elements that are kind of more transparent and some elements that are not. So what this means is that the FOCP project, all of those elements need to be built by December 2023. So those are what I like to call super expedited elements. And we've identified those elements. This is one of the elements within reach 6. In reach 6, there is actually only one element. Why is this again? Because the approximate capacity right now of this area is 4,500 cubic feet per second. And the ADTP emergency operation flow is anticipated to see flows in this area in the order of 5,600 cubic feet per second. So if this is released, or we see these from upstream, this area is going to flood after December 2023. Similarly, reach 7, I have included all of the elements of the preferred project alternative, but there are some elements that are transparent. Now, the ones that are not transparent, those are the ones that need to be built. They need to be built as part of the FERC order compliance project. Why? Because they have approximate capacities that are lower than what is going to be expected after the Anderson Dam Tunnel project starts operating. For example, I'm not going to go over all of these, but for this area here, located east of South 17th Street, between Santa Clara and San Fernando Street, the approximate capacity before the properties begin flooding is 1,600 cubic feet per second. And the ADTP emergency operation flow is expected to be 4,000 cubic feet per second. So all of these elements are elements that are part of the FOCP. That doesn't mean that the rest of the project is not going to be built. It means that those elements that are not transparent need to be built by December 2023. And the schedule for the rest of the elements, it's gonna be given by the design team in a minute. Again, we are here at the end of the planning phase of the project. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Alec Nicholas, who's the capital engineering manager for one of our design and construction units. Alec?
Thank you very much, Damaris. Good evening, everybody. My name is Alec Nicholas. I'm the capital engineering manager for the design phase of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. As Damaris had mentioned, the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project, the elements span from reach 4 to reach 8. This evening, we've been speaking mostly about the elements about reach 7 and reach 6, but all the elements of the Coyote Creek project between 4 and 8 reaches will be split depending on what elements need to be constructed by the time the Anderson Dam Tunnel project is completed in December of 2023, as we show in this graph. Those elements will be part of the mitigation measures of the FOCP, or the FERC Order Compliance Project, which is the first blue row in the design phase. So that'll first need to be designed, and then it'll go into construction first. That will need to coincide with the construction end of Anderson Dam Tunnel project in December 2023. The remaining elements of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Projects in reaches 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 that weren't already designed and constructed will be following suit and almost parallel schedules, first in design and then following into construction. And these elements will need to be in place by fall of 2025 to coincide with the site preparation for the construction of the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project, more specifically, the completion of the high-level outlet that Chris Hakes was mentioning. Now, all these elements in design are going to have benefits not only to the adjacent properties or businesses, but also to the surrounding neighborhoods as well. Now, as we go into the design phase, we'll be coordinating various aspects. But to summarize first, we are wrapping up the planning phase right now. We'll be completing the planning study report shortly. The Valley Water Board will be reviewing the engineer's report and the CEQA exemption for the FOCP on the June 23rd Valley Water Board meeting. Once the board approves the engineer's report, the project will be transitioning to the design phase. In the design phase, there are several key elements, and the first two that will be coming up very shortly is the preliminary design aspect, as well as the real estate work and the utility coordination. So some of the preliminary design aspects include collecting a lot of project data, reviewing the existing right-of-way information, procuring external design consultants, selecting design alternatives, and then at the same time, for the real estate and utility coordination work, we will be beginning negotiations with the property owners after the engineer's report is approved by the Valley Water Board, acquiring any necessary easements, and coordinating with utilities as well as any municipalities. The remaining summary of the design elements include environmental permitting, the final design, and advertising for construction. Now, during the entire design phase, just as in the planning phase, we will be continuing to meet with the public and updating the public on the current status of the project, soliciting input from you on various design elements, including aesthetics, signage, open space, public art. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you prefer, what your thoughts are for each specific neighborhood. We want to make sure that each element is compatible with the surrounding community. And it is a Valley Water Board policy, especially for aesthetics. So we do take that very seriously, and we do really want to hear from you during the design phase specifically as well. Now, I would like to transition to introducing the design team. Again, my name is Alec Nicholas. I'm the Capital Engineering Manager. And during the design phase, the main point of contact will be the project manager, Latina Nishijima, as well as Jose Villarreal, the public information representative. Additionally, we are very fortunate that Damaris will be joining the design team as well as an assistant project manager. Now, I'd like to take a few minutes to allow Latina Nishijima and Jose to introduce themselves. Latina?
Hi, everyone. As Alec mentioned, my name is Latina Nishijima. I look forward to working on this exciting project with everyone. Yeah, looking forward to talking with you.
And I'll reintroduce Jose Villarreal. Jose?
Hello, again, welcome to everyone, and just looking forward to working with everybody as we move this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will transition back to Christine.
Both presentations were very interesting. Thank you very much, Alec and Damaris. Now it's time to hear from you. I would like to walk through a couple logistics before we get started. Again, we hope this evening to alternate between written and verbal questions. Please submit your questions in writing through the Q&A portal or on Facebook. As we mentioned, Valley Water staff will submit them on your behalf. Feel free to raise your hand in your virtual hand, and we'll call on you. And again, take advantage of the Facebook feed. Just to review, the purpose of tonight's meeting was really to provide an update on the Anderson Dam seismic retrofit project, to present the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project recommended alternatives, and then to introduce you to the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Design Team. And now is your opportunity to ask questions about both of those projects. The ground rules one more time. Please listen with an open mind, submit your questions to participate, be curious, assume good intent, use productive, respectful language, be brief and concise to ensure that all interested folks can participate, and any questions related to ongoing litigation, please refer those to your respective legal counsel. So here we go. I see that we do have 11 questions in the Q&A portal. That's great. I just wanted to check in with Albert to see if we had any individuals that had raised their hands that we could kick off the session with a verbal question. Albert? Let's see, why don't we? Okay, why don't we jump in to just the first written question, and then we'll rotate back to a verbal question. The first one reads, to calculate the potential flows at William Street Bridge, what are the tributaries to Coyote Creek upstream from William Street? And I'm wondering if the best person to respond to that question at Valley Water is Afshin Rouhani, the Water Policy and Planning Manager.
Good evening, everybody. Just really quick, I guess, upstream of William Street, there are, several tributaries. The two sizable ones are Upper Silver Creek and then Fisher Creek. And there's many minor tributaries, but those are the major ones.
Great. The next question, the district has an employee under orders from the State Division of the Safety of Dams to fix Anderson Spillway since the 1980s. Why has the district not done that, and why did it take an order from FERC to finally get the district to do the right thing? So I think that's a question for Chris Hakes to respond to some of those process steps and timing.
Thank you, Christine. There's a lot of different elements in the question, so I'll try to go through it systematically to answer it. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the spillway report from the 1980s, so I can't speak to the extent of the repair that was documented. I do know that the district has over the years gone out and done repairs to the spillway. We do an annual inspection with DSOD to note any discrepancies, and I've never seen anything that said replace in its entirety until just 2017 after the Oroville issue. However, let's talk about what the right thing is and what FERC actually told us to do. As you can see from the FOCP, FERC is actually not mandating that we replace the spillway. They're mandating that we drain the reservoir and put an outlet tunnel in. So I would say that the district has been doing the right thing. The reason it's been taking so long, I think I touched on the fact that the project has expanded a few times over the years. It's over doubled in size, and the different design criteria for some of the components have also changed. But really, it comes down to that slide where you saw all of the different agencies that are involved in the project. There are over 13 permitting agencies involved, and to get everyone on the same page has been quite the challenge. We've actually had to have assistance from our legislature to make it move forward. Basically, you've got Assembly Bill 3005 to expedite construction of the Anderson project through best value construction, as well as other things currently going through the state legislature. We've had our federal delegation, Representative Lofgren, Representative Khanna, Representative Panetta, and Representative Ashu actually convene meetings in Washington, D.C. To basically get us to move the project forward, along with the assistance of the regulators to get everyone lined up. We actually do that on a quarterly basis. So basically, the long answer short is there are so many different entities involved. Getting alignment in order to move forward is very difficult. But I believe now that we have the momentum and everyone recognizes this is a public safety issue first, we will get it complete.
Great, thank you, Chris. Albert, are we ready to offer folks the opportunity to, I know we have some folks that have raised their virtual hand, to be able to ask their questions now?
Sure, I just want to check my mic. Can you hear me now?
We sure can, thanks.
Sorry about that. I had too many things open in terms of microphones. All right, we're going to go first with Maria Rosario. Sorry about the hiccup earlier. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and please ask your question away.
Hi, thank you. So good evening. First, I wanted to make a comment and then ask my question. As one of the residents who was flooded and evacuated in 2017, I do have a strong interest in keeping our community from flooding again. But something is really bothering me. As a person of color, me and my neighbors are disgusted with Director Keegan and Lazat's behavior. racist behavior before and during the hiring of their new Black CEO. And clearly you are the people who push racist processes towards Black men. To be clear, I don't care how you voted, but I am disgusted with your racist actions before and during the process. And I'm sure you wonder why the Black Lives Matter movement is so loud right now. It's because of Karens exactly like you. And I believe people like you should not be representing my neighborhood. And I hope Keegan resigns. I'm appalled at the thought of her ever being on my ballot again. So with that said, my question is, what is the exact timing for the William Street flood protection completion? And is it expected to change? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for participating in the meeting this evening. Afshin, do you want to jump back into this conversation again? Afshin Rouhani, the Water Policy and Planning Manager, to answer that question related to William Street flood protection?
Actually, I think this is a design question, design scheduling. So Alex should really answer this one.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alec.
I was actually going to coordinate and tag team with Damaris on this one for the specific elements. So Damaris, if you want to take lead on this, and I'll respond afterwards and fill in if need be.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Maria, for your question. As I mentioned, specifically the William Street Park berm that we're proposing to complete it by the end of year 2025. Now, this in terms of, is it gonna change? Well, that's the schedule that we have now, and personally, I'm doing everything I can to keep the schedule that we had mentioned from the beginning, but I don't wanna commit because we don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. Or hopefully not another pandemic, but we're all committed here at Valley Water into completing this project, and it's a priority of the board to complete this project. Other specific elements that I mentioned as part of the FOCP, those are, as Alec had mentioned, scheduled to be completed construction by the end of 2023. So if there is any follow-up questions, let us know. Thank you.
And if I may add, Maria, the two end dates of December 2023 and fall 2025, those are hard deadlines right now that are out of the Coyote Creek's team's control, because we need to make these elements in place, designed, constructed, and in place such that the flows from Anderson Dam Tunnel Project and the Anderson Dam High Level Tunnel, when they come down, these elements are ready to go. So hopefully that clarified and answered your question.
Great, thanks, Alec. And related to the individual's comment prior to the question, I just wanted to share that Valley Water received a complaint letter from Reverend Jethro Moore, president of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. Valley Water will follow its existing board governance policy with this matter. Board governance policy 6.17 sets forth the district's applicable policy and is available on Valley Water's website under the How We Operate heading at www.valleywwater.org/how-we-operate/board-governance-policies. Thanks. Albert, let's take one more virtual raised hand question, and then we'll move back to the written questions.
Sure thing. We have a question from Jean Marie White. I'm going to enable your microphone. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. You're free to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear clearly? Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. I just wanted to highlight the great work that Damaris has been doing, and we've been talking to her before, and it's been a pleasure working with her. So I just wanted to salute her participation and contribution to this project. I have a couple of questions. One is about the William Street Park options. One is a berm or passive barrier. And I just want to know, I'm not quite clear on the process for how this is going to get decided. And then the second question is about the flood wall itself. I read in the previous literature that we were considering stacked steel, and I'm just not sure. And then the pictures you showed today were sort of like the original, like bricked, fences. So I'm just not sure what if everything is still on the table, or how this is going to get decided.
So for that question, I'm going to ask Alec Nicholas to join the discussion again to talk a little bit about design.
Sure, I'll take the second part of that question and I'll allow Damaris to respond to the first part about the passive barriers and berm, I believe was your question, sir. The flood walls right now, we have a lot of options on the table. It's based on site-specific conditions, and we won't know until the design phase begins and we collect enough site-specific data to see what type of structural wall we can use, taking into account aesthetics, taking into account cost, taking into account feasibility, structurally speaking, and vibration, noise, dust, all those kind of aspects. Right now, if you recall, or if you can go back to the PowerPoint slides after this meeting, which will be posted, the slide that showed various types of walls, the first picture that it had like green walls with a concrete cap, that is a steel sheet pile wall, which I believe you were referring to. So that is one of the options that we are considering. There's a lot of aesthetic options that you can add on top of a steel sheet pile wall. So it's not just going to be steel sheet pile, for example, and then we won't consider any aesthetics. So that's my response to part of your question, and I'll allow Damaris to respond to the first part of your question.
Yes, hi, John Marie. Thank you for your comment. It's been really nice working with you and you opening your home to have some of those public meetings, actually getting very close to the public. That has been a joy. I hope I can do it again once this pandemic is over. But going back to the question, William Street Park. So for William Street Park specifically, I mentioned that the preferred project alternative that resulted out of the natural flood protection process was the berm at William Street. Now, the various criteria that was used to determine that, again, has to do with the natural flood protection process, which is mandated by the board. And it looks at a specific structure based from the point of view of safety, economic protection, durability, resiliency, local drainage, and time to implementation. So I do have a document that I believe we can share so that you can take a look at kind of the tedious, sometimes, I think it's a little tedious, the process of after we have all of our project alternatives, the 11 that I mentioned, and sorry for my long presentation, but I wanted to go over that. After we have all those project alternatives that we developed together with you, the public, we have to go through the natural flood protection process to select the least environmentally damaging alternative. Now, it's a long response, but I can share with you that process or the framework for that process. But specifically for the William Street Park, we're proposing the berm.
Okay, and that has been decided.
Well, it has to go to the board first.
I see. Okay, great. I love the berm. I love the berm idea. So just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah.
Thank you for participating and for the question. I'm going to move on to the written questions. We do have 21 questions in our written queue. I know we have others with their hands raised. This is wonderful that people are being patient and participating. I just wanted to remind folks that are watching on Facebook Live, you are welcome to submit questions there as well, and staff will submit them in your question into the Q&A portal. So the next question is related to a photo. In the presentation, you show in your opening credits a picture of Coyote Creek, and it's cluttered with debris, which has repeatedly been identified as one of the sources of flooding. When will this be cleared? This is the creek bed from Kelly Park to San Jose High School. For that, I'm going to bring in Sue Tibbetts, the Deputy Operating Officer of Watershed Operations and Maintenance Division, just about maintenance and cleanup. Sue?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We sure can. Thanks for
Oh,
joining.
okay, good. My connection was going out here. But anyway, so this is kind of a multi-part answer to this question. First of all, you know, debris in the creek, which may consider of vegetation or down trees, that's often a contributor to the stream habitat. So there is a fine line between what may be considered debris and what is actually a good element of the creek. Then the other part of the question is, or the answer is that as far as clearing it is, the land rights within this area are either, for the most part, private property, you know, they're owned by private individuals, and in some areas down by Kelly Park are owned by the city of San Jose. The water district, Valley Water, has a small piece of, relatively small piece of land rights in there. And we are only authorized to do work on lands that we own or have a land interest in. So there's very little of this reach that we can actually act in. This particular project will include land rights for the improvements, the flood walls, the berms, those sorts of things, but it is not anticipated to include land rights that include all of the area in the creek. The design of the project is also such that it allows for the vegetation and some of that what might be considered debris to remain in the channel without increasing those water surface elevations. And then the last remark is that the flooding, you know, flooding usually occurs because there's too much water and not so much because of this debris or vegetation or what you might consider clutter in the channel. So that should conclude my answer.
Thanks, Sue. Really appreciate that. So the next question really pertains to the next component of this project. And it reads, what determines the decision to acquire or raise homes in Nagley Park? I know that Valley Water is just now or will soon enter that design discussion. But Alec, do you want to respond to that question for
Absolutely.
the public?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the question. As Damaris and I have discussed, we are right now transitioning from the planning to the design phase. And the first step in determining this decision would be when the board approves the project on June 23rd. They may give further clarification or guidance on this matter. Once the project is approved, after that, you know, negotiations and outreach can begin with the property owners. And there are various different elements that go into determining the best feasible solution for each site specific. Once we, you know, get to collect data, you know, perform preliminary engineering, you know, there's so many different elements that go into it. But the first step is the Valley Water Board approving the engineer's report on June 23rd and potentially giving us further guidance.
Great, thanks, Alec. The next question reads, based on probable maximum precipitation, what is the predicted maximum flow rate at William Street Bridge after the tunnel is installed, but before the new dam is constructed? And for that, Damaris, can you provide a response, or would you prefer that I bring Afshin Rouhani, the Water Policy Planning Manager, in to respond to that question?
I think it might have to do with the dam, with Chris Hakes.
Okay. 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 Chris?
Thanks, Christine. Can you read the question?
Sure. Based on probable maximum precipitation, what is the predicted maximum flow rate at William Street Bridge after the tunnel is installed, but before the new dam is constructed?
So unfortunately, while I can say what the maximum flow rate out of the new outlet would be that we would be passing prior to the dam being constructed, I can't tell you because of the tributary contributions what it would be at William Street Bridge. What we're looking at is a maximum of 2,500 CFS coming from the dam itself through the combination of the existing outlet and the new outlet. Now, that said, that would be in an event that would be, I would say, of normal magnitude and contained within the reservoir. There is still the possibility that we could have a release over the spillway if we got heavy enough rains that we were not effective at controlling the level before activating the spillway. In that case, you could exceed that amount. The tributaries and how much they contribute would also need to be factored in. AFSHE may have that answer, or we could kick it back to staff for a more detailed analysis. We have a very smart H&H department, hydraulics and hydrology, that would be able to get that number.
Okay, AFSHE, do you have anything to add right now, or is that just something we, Valley Water can respond to with some additional analysis?
Well, we can, but it is a difficult question to respond to. I would point out that the PMP, probable maximum precipitation, or more often called, resulting in the probable maximum flood, these events are very, very, very low frequency events. They are of use to design the spillway of the dam so that the dam doesn't fail. They're not really used for flood protection because they result typically in tens of thousands of cubic feet per second, flowing downstream. They're not a flood control number. They're a dam safety number. So, we can certainly though ask our H&H people who are more experts at these to take a look at the question for a more detailed answer.
Great, and Valley Water has indicated that one of the purposes of these meetings is to, mine for those additional questions that that you have, and providing you with the information that you need and you're interested in hearing more about. It looks like we don't have any raised hands right now. I see that the next two questions are really related to the design component of the project, and we've heard Alec talk about the next milestone in this project is the Board of Directors' decision on the Coyote Creek flood components related to the FOCP on June 23rd, but I am going to read them. And I know that and Alec, I'll bring you in to see if you would like to provide any additional comments, but this is really related to the next phase following that board decision. So the first question is, for the area, homes marked for elevation, would city pay for all the costs associated with the same? How about residents and tenants? Would you provide alternate housing during this process? That's kind of one bucket. And then there's another bucket that reads, who pays to elevate homes? And I know that that's in a later phase related to any acquisition or design of the flood protection system. Did you have anything you would like to add, Alec? Nicholas?
Sure, yes. The first part of, I think, both questions, if and when the board approves the project and if they give us further direction, and if the decision is, even during design, to elevate, then the funds would come from Valley Water funds. The exact sources are still to be determined, but it would be through Valley Water funds. Regarding the second question, or second aspect of the first question, I believe it was alternate housing. This would be part of the negotiation process if the elevation were to be deemed feasible and the best option, and given direction by the board to proceed that way. That will be part of the negotiation process with each individual owner, and to understand the specific situations to each parcel.
Great, thanks. And again, Alec Nicholas is the project manager on the design phase. So just to remind folks of your role. So the next question reads, how did you, Valley Water, calculate the ADSRP, flow to be 4,000 CFS? So Chris Hakes, Deputy Operating Officer of Dam Safety Capital Delivery Division, can you answer that question?
Sure. So I think it's not that it was calculated at 4,000 CFS as much as it was that the drawdown requirements from the Department of Safety of Dams and with the requirements from FERC have dictated that between our two outlets, the total capacity, the new lower level outlet and new higher level outlet, the total capacity is around, I want to say 65 to 6,800 CFS. In that case, basically, if you took the existing 2,500 CFS that we have now, or will have after the completion of the Anderson Dam Tunnel project, once the restrictors on the low-level outlet have been removed, that flow can then go up as high as an additional 4,000 CFS. I mean, there are scenarios in which, like I said, if the spillway is ever activated, there would be flow in excess of that, but it's more of a physical geometric constraint of the outlet than it is a calculation of inflow versus outflow.
Great, thank you very much. The next question is, reads, how do we know the projects in the Rock Springs area won't induce flooding downstream in the Olander area? And I know, Damaris, in your presentation, you talked a little bit about the system and how it would protect or reduce risk in those areas. Do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question, Katia. Thank you for the question. So what we do, as I mentioned, well, not me only, but we have the hydraulics and hydrology team working with the project team to model the proposed scenario, basically. So we have a hydraulic model that has the creek, all of the 9 miles, and even a little bit more. We run the model, create simulations, and then we look at the water surface elevation of the model. Then we add all of the elements that I mentioned, you know, flood walls, we add levees, we remove things, depending on what we're proposing to do to the actual model. And then we run it again, and we make sure that we're not inducing flooding anywhere else with by adding a single individual element. So actually, we are right now finalizing that proposed model. We had it in our team. We finalized it, but I sent it over to H&H, Hydraulics and Hydrology, sorry, to make sure that our assumptions in the model are the correct assumptions. Yeah, but yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Damaris, keep your mic on. When will the decision be made between 7B and 7E?
Oh, sorry, you said keep it on. Okay. So so most of the elements in REACH 7 that have to do with the FERC audit compliance project, that includes the elevation or acquisition of 10 properties, 10 residential properties. Now, during June 23rd meeting, both kind of the hybrid that I mentioned before, that is gonna be the project presented to the board. So then they're gonna make this, if they approve it, you know, and I hope that they do, if they approve it, it's gonna be either or. And then the negotiations are gonna start. So basically after that, we're gonna get that signals the green light for us, for staff, to go and talk to individual property owners. You know, I've heard from owners wanting to, you know, interested in the acquisition. I've heard from owners that are no, you know, we are interested in elevating. So, but again, that's gonna be done after June 23rd. And the project that the board is gonna approve includes either or, includes both. And I think that's the main element that changes between 7E and 7B. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Damaris. And I think this next question is along the same lines. So if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. We are in Reach 7. It looks like you now have 2 alternatives. How and when will you decide on which of these? And I think you've essentially answered that. But you can keep your mic on. The next question reads, I live across from William Street Park. Why isn't a wall being constructed behind the park?
I'm assuming you're talking of a wall very close to the creek, right? If not, feel free to put it in the question and answer box. So basically, what we're doing is we are, as I mentioned, we're trying to find the best alternative together that is not going to impact the environment in a negative way. Now, whenever we build things very close to the creek, we don't only impact the environment because we're very close to the riparian corridor, but we're also might be increasing the water surface elevation because we're constraining the water a little bit more. So we're trying to allow the creek to do what it has done for centuries. I presented some of the pictures in my first meeting, the spring 2019 meeting, of what the creek has done in the past. William Street Park, it's a historical floodplain of Coyote Creek. And if we start constraining the creek in areas where it shouldn't be constrained, it might create flooding somewhere else. So it's somewhat related to what Katia was saying. So we're trying to stay away from the creek, also so that we can move the project forward a little faster. Once we start impacting the channel and having things very close to the banks, then it triggers all sorts of permitting, and permitting can take many years. We only have, as you saw, a couple of years to design and construct the entire project.
Right. Thank you. So this next question, Damaris, I'm going to keep your mic on, is also related to William Street Park. It reads, in our past meetings, the concern about a berm, a 3-foot barrier at William Street Park, would encourage the homeless and more crime, as well as prevent police from having visual oversight. Our group strongly wanted the passive barrier along this edge for this reason. Why is it not the top alternative?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So as you saw in my presentation, we had both alternatives, the passive barrier as well as the berm. And what we did, again, and just like I've explained to John Marie, we have to go through the Valley Water mandated policy, which is a natural flood protection framework, to look at the project from 10 objectives, and most of them are environmental objectives, as well as safety, durability, economic protection, and resiliency. And based on that framework, the berm turned out to be scored higher than the passive barrier. And I can show you those documents. It's not based on, we have both alternatives. It's not based on the project team, but based mostly on the least environmentally damaging alternative for that area, since we had both options. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before we jump into the next question, I just wanted to let all of you know that we have 72 members from the community that are participating in tonight's meeting, and that's really impressive. And again, thank you all for attending. And we still have 16 questions in the queue. We don't have anybody with their hands raised right now, but this is great, the level of engagement and the thoughtful nature of these questions. So the next question reads, what are the addresses of the Elevate Acquire homes? I'm not sure that all of that information is available today. So Alec, any response to that piece as it relates to the design phase? Alec Nicholas?
Yes, I would refer them to the engineer's report. It has the assessor's parcel number, or APNs, of these specific properties or parcels described in the engineer's report.
Great, thank you. That's very useful information. We're back to the William Street Park. This question reads, Damaris, in Reach 7, the proposal is to use a combination of burn and retaining wall you've talked a little bit about the strategy and the criteria for the decision making. The retaining wall appears to extend into the park. Is this accurate? If not, exactly where will the retaining wall behind the park on the south side terminate?
Yeah, no, that's a very good observation. There is no, so there is a flood wall that we're proposing, but the flood wall in the south side of the park is going to be located in private property. Basically, there are two homes located south of William Street, and you guys, you know more this neighborhood than me, Bill. There are two residents that live there that got affected by the 2017 flood event, and we've done outreach to them. And these flood walls, while they'll kind of connect with the berm, they're going to be located in their property. That makes sense. I know the drawings are not very exact. That's what we're going to be doing into design. Yeah, that's a very good observation. So it's not in the park. It's actually in private property.
Okay, great. Thanks, Damaris. And I think I'm so pleased that this next question has been asked because it is an important question, and jurisdictions need to deal with it very thoughtfully. And the question is there any point in the process at which some neighborhoods are at increased risk of flooding? So Damaris, do you want to talk about any of the process related to the board criteria or any of the regulations that provide guidance on the system design?
I'm not too sure I understand the question. What I can say is that the goal of the project is to reduce the risk of flooding similarly to the flood event that happened in 2017. That's approximately a 20-year flood event. Now, I've gotten this question asked before: what happens if we have a 100-year flood event? Especially with the onset of climate change. So the way we see this, and any of the directors, can chime in, is that this is because we understand that there is an urgent need for this project, for us to do something. We're seeing this as a first step, into making the neighborhood more resilient to climate change and to the future. Because if we go all the way to the 100-year flood event, flood protection project, and we did that in the early 2000s, the project cost back then was between $500 million and $1 billion. So there was not enough funding for that project, but we need to do something. So we're seeing it as stages, and I guess that's my response. I don't know if somebody else wants to chime in from staff or from the board, the Valley Water Board.
Christine, this is Afshin. May I add something?
Please.
Okay. I just, I think everything that Damaris said is correct, of course. I would only add that if the point of the question was is there any point in the process in the sense that of the combination of the dam work going on at Anderson Dam and the reflection of that downstream and the work that is going to be done in flood protection downstream. One thing that we have talked about in previous project meetings has been, and this project meeting has been, that this is why there is an urgency to do the work that is being proposed down here in advance of the completion of the tunnel, and then later of the beginning of the work on the dam replacement, is that we need these improvements downstream, these capacity enhancements to be in place so that the additional ability to release flows from Anderson Dam will not cause an increased risk of flooding downstream. So that's why there's these tight timelines for the design team to have to, build things by 2023 and then end of 2025, so that the increased potential flows from the dam upstream will not increase the risk of flooding for the neighborhoods downstream.
Great, thanks. That question has come up at previous discussions. So the next question has some kind of preview comments or framing. It reads, the FEMA firm shows an AH flood zone south of the lower Silver Creek Coyote confluence. This area is identified as the 5 Wones Urban Village Plan. It appears preferred alternative 6A does not provide any betterment in this area. Is that correct? Will alternative 6A increase the flood level in this area? Damaris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna respond to the bottom.
Yeah.
The second, will alternative 6A increase? As I mentioned, working with hydraulics and hydrology, alternatives are not looking to increase the water surface elevation throughout the whole project scope, the 9 miles. I'll need to get back to Mike regarding the first part of his question to see exactly what area this is before I respond, unless somebody else has a specific answer or know more about the firm map.
Okay.
We'll get back to Mike. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. So the next question reads, it appears most project improvements, berms, flood walls, etc., are located outside the creek footprint. How is the project team preserving the natural habitat during the design and construction? So Alec, Nicholas, could you respond to that question? Again, project manager of the design component.
Sure, that's a great question. I think you already kind of described the main way that we're going to preserve the natural habitat in the first part of your question. Planning staff, Damaris specifically, have done a great job to painstakingly analyze the whole creek and locate a lot of these project elements outside of the top of banks to avoid impacts to natural habitat in the creek. So that, I think, has already done a drastic amount to help with that. Now, of course, during design and construction, there will be necessary, like all the PMPs required. So those all will be taken into account. Coordination with biologists, environmental planners, all that stuff will be taken into account. But the main aspect, I think, has already been done in the planning phase, which has been a huge help for design.
Great. Thank you very much, Alec.
We cannot hear you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone that we're at about past 7:45. We'll close a couple minutes early just to share some reminders, and then also invite Director Keegan back to share some closing remarks. We're going to make our way through as many of the remaining questions as possible. I see in the queue that there are 11. If for any reason the team doesn't have an opportunity to review and respond to your question, they will be addressed in the updated frequently asked questions available at the project website, and I'll share that at the end of the meeting. But let's keep going. But just wanted to share that. So this individual indicates, I live across from William Street Park. Why isn't a wall being created behind the park? Damaris, you mentioned this earlier. Building a berm wall in front of the park could elicit or cause some negative behavior, which could be seen from 16th Street.
Yeah, just to add to my answer before, as we are trying to not increase the water surface elevation by getting too close to the creek, also staying away so that we don't affect any of the riparian corridor and doesn't trigger additional permitting. Also, if we install a wall close to the creek, it'll be a wall probably between 8 and 9 feet tall, very close to the creek. And it'll be also hard to access the creek, not only for any people that want to access it, but also for our operations and maintenance staff that might want to do some maintenance in the area. I just wanted to add that to my response before. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Damaris. And the next question, Alec, I'm gonna bring you into this discussion. Clearly, there's a neighborhood interest here related to ongoing work on a garden. Looking at the photos of the berm, the one that was built with the road is pretty basic. And then we are shown beautiful garden berms with flowers and great stonework. And you say that aesthetics are important to you. The aesthetics are important and you will listen to community members. When you build a berm, will you include irrigation in the berm to support ongoing gardening? Will you have meetings to design this garden? We already have a wildflower garden that appears to be in the way, and will it be demolished? I've been in previous meetings where everyone was very attentive to the input, but nothing has ever been done to implement the changes that were proposed. So Alec, do you want to jump in and talk about again, the design component of the project?
Sure, I will take a crack at this one. So regarding the aesthetics, this will be, as this community member has indicated, this will be an ongoing solicitation of input from the community. Now, regarding if there will be irrigation to support the gardens, assuming that there is plantings that are needed, if these are not drought-tolerant plants already to begin with, that will be part of the design phase with a landscape architect, et cetera, if that is the step or that is the process that we choose to go with. Now, let me see the rest of it. Will we have meetings to design this garden? Yes, that will be solicitation with the public. There will be regular meetings during the design phase of the project. Bear with me. In order to have a wildflower garden that appears to be in the way and will be demolished. Okay, I guess that part wasn't a question. So I hope I answered your question, but yes, we'll be coordinating with the public, soliciting your input on what is the best preferred alternative that you would like to see on this berm, what kind of things you would like to see, if we can incorporate it, how can we incorporate it, was the best and most cost-effective way to incorporate all these elements, and it'll be a ongoing work in progress with the community.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of our meeting. I do see that we have 10 questions left in the queue. Thank you for participating. The public engagement meaningfully influences, obviously, public policy. It's critical. And again, the questions that are posted, we have them included in the Zoom portal, and Valley Water staff will work to provide responses to those questions. So again, thank you for participating this evening. Just to remind you all, again, there will be a presentation of the engineer's report for the Anderson Dam Federal Energy Regulatory Commission Order Compliance Project. The FOCP includes some elements of flood protection on Coyote Creek. And again, that meeting is slated to take place on June 23rd at 6 p.m. Please visit Valley Water's website for project updates, the updated FAQ, copies of the meeting recordings from the June 10th, 11th, and 17th meeting. That's at www.valleywater.org/Coyote-Creek. Explore the project updates that are available there. I believe that the portals to the Anderson Dam project are also accessible at that website. And Valley Water would really encourage you to take a survey to provide feedback on tonight's meeting. So before we close, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Director Barbara Keegan just to provide some final comments. Director Keegan? I'm sorry, I think she may be having, Director Keegan?
Hi, can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Hello?
Yes. We can hear you, Director Keegan.
Hello, can anyone hear me? Okay, great. For some reason, I was not able to hear Christine, so a little bit of a glitch here at the end. So I really would like to thank all of you so much for participating in tonight's virtual Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project meeting. I know that we all really appreciated your thoughtful comments and questions. It was great to have so many people attend and so many questions. I wish we could have gotten to all of them, but we will follow up and respond to all of those. So as previously mentioned, my board colleagues and I will be discussing some of the recommended alternatives at our June 23rd board meeting. So this is an evening meeting. It's going to start at 6 p.m. and I really hope that you can join us. Your input is really critical as all the board members make a decision as to how to go forward on these projects. So we're going to continue to provide updates and engage with you as the project moves into the design phase. And we've got a great team. I think that you were able to see that as part of tonight's presentation. And I know that they're going to work very hard to make this be successful. Valley Water is committed to moving this project forward and getting this project built as quickly as possible. I know this community has waited a long time, and I don't want you to have to continue to wait further. So with that, again, thank you for being here. I wish everyone a good evening, and please stay safe. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you.